Hello everyone, my name is Jake, and I will be discussing today understanding MySQL roles, privileges, and access control. Now imagine you're working in a company with a shared database. Different employees need different levels of access to that database. Some need to only view the data, while others need the ability to modify it. How do you manage what gets access to what in a secure and efficient way so that everyone has access to exactly what they need? The answer lies in what we had discussed originally: roles, privileges, and access control. These concepts help ensure that users only have access to the data they need to perform their job, no more, no less, and nothing in between. This minimizes the risk of accidental or malicious data exposure. In this tutorial, we'll explore more on how SQL uses roles to manage user permissions. You'll learn how to grant specific privileges to users, assign roles, and apply security best practices to protect your data, which of course is the most important thing. By understanding these concepts, you'll be able to implement better security practices in any MySQL-based system. Now, before we get underway with some demonstrations, let's explain the core concepts of what we're looking at specifically today: roles and privileges. As stated, roles and privileges are key elements of MySQL's access control system, which determines who can do what with the data in your specific database. The problem is simple. In an environment with many users, you don't want everyone having the same level of access to your database. You need a way to control which users can read data, update data, or manage the structure of the database. Roles, specifically in MySQL, are essentially a collection of privileges, a package of permissions that can be granted to users. This system allows you to avoid granting individual privileges to each user one by one. Instead, you can create roles for different types of users, assign the relevant privileges to those roles, and then assign the roles to users. Specifically, one person gets one job, one person gets another job. It's an easy way to make your life a lot simpler. Privileges, on the other hand, define what actions users can perform on the database. Things like reading data, inserting data, updating data, or even managing the database structure. Together, both roles and privileges help to enforce access control, ensuring that only the right users have the right level of access. Why is this so important to security, you might ask? In the world of database management, security is a top priority. You do not want your most vital or most important information getting out to everyone. Improper access control can result in data breaches, unintended data modification, or even data loss. For example, if a user has excessive privileges, they could accidentally delete critical data or expose sensitive information. On the other hand, if users don't have the privileges they need, they may not be able to perform their job effectively. By using roles and privileges, you can ensure that your database follows the principle of least privilege, which means users should only have the minimum access required to do their job. You don't want to give someone more access than they should have. At the same time, as stated above, we don't want to make sure that we're limiting someone on what they need to complete their job successfully. This method of segregating duties helps mitigate security risks and ensures that only authorized users can make changes to the data. Let's now discuss best practices for database security. Number 1, follow the principle of least privilege. Always grant users the minimum privileges they need to perform their job. For example, if a user only needs to read data, grant them the select privilege and nothing more. Number 2, using roles to simplify management. Instead of assigning individual privileges to each user, create roles that represent common sets of privileges, i.e. data reader, data writer, or DB admin, and assign those roles to users. This makes managing permissions much easier, especially when you have large numbers of users. Number 3, regularly review and revoke unnecessary privileges. If users no longer need certain privileges or roles, revoke them immediately. Over time, users' roles and responsibilities may change, so it's essential to audit and maintain access control. Number 4, always test privileges in a safe environment. Before granting roles or making changes to privileges, always test them in a development or staging environment. This ensures you don't accidentally disrupt critical business operations. And number 5, use role-based access control, or RBAC, effectively. Assign roles to users based on their job function, and regularly update roles and privileges to keep up with changes in organizational structure or security policies. Great, now that you have that down, let's do some demonstrations. Now that we've discussed the concepts and best practices, let's go through a step-by-step demonstration of how roles and privileges work in MySQL. You'll see how to create roles, assign privileges, and verify role assignments. We'll be going through 5 steps on how to create roles, assign privileges to roles, assigning roles to users, verifying role assignments, and revoking privileges and roles for those who do not need. Let's go over step 1, creating roles in MySQL. Roles are easy to create in MySQL. Let's create a simple role called Data Reader that only allows users to read data from the database. As you can see, we've created our role. This role is now ready to be assigned to any user who needs read-only access to all database. Step number 2, assigning privileges to roles. Now let's say that we have a data writer role, and we want to grant it both select and update privileges on specific database, i.e. company database. We're going to create our role, data writer, and we're going to grant select and update on company database to the specific data writer. Now, users who are assigned the data writer role will be able to read and modify data in the company database. Step 3, assigning roles to users. Once you've created these roles, the next step is to assign them to users. For instance, let's assign the data reader role to a user called Alice. We are now granting privileges defined by the data reader role to Alice, that she can only read data from databases. Step 4, verifying role assignments. To check which privileges a user has been granted, you can use the show grants command. Let's check what privileges Alice has. This will return the privileges assigned to Alice, and you'll see something like this. Last but not least, step 5, revoking privileges and roles. If Alice no longer needs the data reader role, you can revoke it with the command below. This removes Alice's read-only access to all databases. Each of these 5 steps allows us to create our roles, to assign privileges to those roles, assigning roles to users, verifying roles assignment, and revoking privileges and roles. Now let's review each step one more time. If you wish to pause after each step, please do so, as you will be able to create and demonstrate through your own SQL. Once again, step 1, creating roles in MySQL. As you see below, we have created the role Data Reader, and now this role is ready to be assigned to any user who needs read-only access databases. Step 2, we now have our Data Writer role, and we want to grant it both select and update privileges on a specific database, company DB. Now, users who are assigned to the Data Writer role will be able to read and modify data in the company database. Step 3, assigning roles to users. Once you've created the roles, the next step is to assign them to users. For instance, let's use our friend Alice one more time. We have assigned the data reader role to Alice. She now has privileges defined by the data reader role. She can only read data from the databases. Step 4, verifying her role as well too. If we want to check privileges of a user you have granted, you can use the show grants command. Once again, this will show specifically what roles Alice has been assigned to. Step 5, revoking privileges and roles. Once again, we're going to use our friend Alice. Alice no longer needs that data reader role, so we can revoke it using the command below. This now removes Alice's read-only access to all databases. We have now learned specific roles and privileges that work together in MySQL to simplify users' access management and improve database security. We've explored how to create roles, grant privileges, assign roles to users, and verify role assignments. By using roles effectively, you can apply the principle of least privilege and ensure that only users have access to the data that they need, no more and no less. This is a very powerful way to manage database security and minimize the risk of unauthorized data access. Now that we've seen how we can create roles, give access to individuals for those roles, verify those roles, and revoke those roles, let's test our knowledge with a little bit more of a tougher example. We're going to use our friend Alice, but we're also going to use 2 more people, Bob and Charlie. Once again, we're going to work in the database company. Our scenario is you work in a company where the company database contains sensitive employee information. You need to grant certain user-specific access. Our friend Alice should only be able to view employee data with the select privilege. Our friend Bob should be able to update employee data but not delete it using the update privilege, where Charlie should be the database administrator with all privileges. You'll create 3 roles: data reader with select access, data writer with select and update access, and DB admin with full access. After creating the roles, you will grant them to Alice, Bob, and Charlie, but there's an issue along the way that you'll need to troubleshoot. If you'd like to pause the video now to create those roles, you may. Great, so let's show how we created our roles and assigned the appropriate privileges to each role. As we can see, we've created our roles for our data writer, our data reader, and our DB admin. Now we're going to grant each of those specific privileges that they are assigned to. Now we're going to assign our roles. As we can see, we've assigned data reader to Alice, data writer to Bob, and data admin to Charlie. At this point though, if you run these commands, you might run into an error that might look like this. So as you can see, we've hit an error. Error 1227, access denied. You need the super privilege for this operation. At first glance, this can be a little confusing. We're trying to assign roles to users, not execute any sort of high-level server operations. So why would MySQL say we need the super privilege? Here's the reason. In MySQL, when you're assigning roles or privileges to other users, you need to have the grant option privilege. The grant option is required to allow a user to grant roles or privileges to others. If you don't have the grant option, MySQL will block you from running these commands and throw an error just like the one we saw. So in this case, the user executing the grant statement doesn't have the necessary privileges to assign roles to other users. Let's work on fixing this error though. To resolve it, we need to make sure that the user running the grant statement has the grant option privilege. Here's how we can do that. We need to log in as a user who does have the grant option, like root or another user with admin privileges. Then we'll grant the grant option privilege to the user who is trying to assign the roles, as we can see below. This gives the user the running command permission to assign roles to other users. Once we have the grant option privilege, we can log in as admin user and retry the grant commands to assign the roles to Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Let's do that now. This time the command runs successfully without error. Now that we've fixed our errors, let's verify our role assignments. We're going to show grants for Alice, Bob, and Charlie, and the output should look something like this. Finally, let's revoke privileges and roles if we wish to. Let's review how to revoke. We're going to use the revoke command, as we can see, from both Alice, Bob, and Charlie. We have revoked Alice from data reader, Bob from data writer, and Charlie from DB admin. In this example, we walk through a common error related to role assignment in MySQL. The error was caused by the lack of necessary privileges for the user attempting to assign roles. We resolved the issue by granting the grant option privilege to the user and retrying the grant statements. The key takeaway here is that we're assigning roles in MySQL. Make sure the user has the appropriate permissions to do so. Always ensure the user has the grant option or super privileges to assign their roles to others. By following best practices for user and role management, you can make your MySQL database more secure and easier to manage, ensuring users only have the access they need to perform the tasks. As we come to a close, let's think of a couple things. Next time you're managing a MySQL database, think about the roles and privileges you're assigning. Are you giving users too much access? Are you practicing the principle of least privilege? Proper role management ensures your data stays secure while making user management easier. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was informative. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Goodbye.